Hello students. Today we are going to begin with the third chapter of the supplementary reader, The Desert. And you all know that as we are all residents of Rajasthan, we are well aware of what a desert is. We know there is a lot of stretch of sand, and as far as we can see, it is just sand and sand, and it could just be a very sparse vegetation of cactus or a few bushes and trees, etc. Then we also know that there is very scanty rainfall that occurs in desert. A desert is generally without water and vegetation. This is what a general idea is, that it has no water and it has no vegetation. It is just bare. A green patch, and we have also heard about that in between the expanse of the desert there are sometimes green areas, also small green areas, which are known as oasis, where you can find some fresh water also, and some trees also in the middle of a very vast desert. And that really is a very nice and beautiful sight, because it is very soothing to see the greenery in between the desert. Now, a desert may be too hot or too cold. You may think that deserts are always hot only, but remember there are cold deserts also. And remember that Ladakh is a cold desert. It has no vegetation. It also has less water and no vegetation, but the temperatures there are too cold, so it is known as a cold desert. Now, those of us who live in regions covered with forests and surrounded by hills may find it difficult to imagine what a desert is really like. Now, at least we all know very well what desert is, but still, this chapter is telling to all the students, all the children who have never seen a desert, because they have been living in an area or in a state where there is a lot of forest cover, and it may be very hilly also. So, let us see, for them and for us also, the description of the desert has been made by the writer. The popular belief is that it is an endless stretch of sand. Yes, we know. We also describe the desert as having an endless stretch of sand. Sand has no ending here. As far as we can see, there is only sand. Where no rain falls and therefore no vegetation grows. We know that because of scanty rainfall, there is no vegetation. It is dry, it is hot, it is waterless, and without shelter. Obviously, because there are no trees, there is no shelter also. But this is not entirely correct. But the author wants to correct you that it is not a perfect reality. There are some other aspects about the desert also, which makes this place very beautiful. For those who have studied it, the desert can be a beautiful place. Now, in which aspect the desert is beautiful? It is the home of a variety of people, animals, and plants that have learned to live under very hot and dry conditions. We know that in the extreme of weather also, there are people who are living in this world. So even in deserts people live. In deserts animals survive, because they have adapted themselves according to the arid uh, conditions of the desert. And there are a few plants also, maybe not much, but yes, a few plants are there that have learned to live under hot and dry conditions. True, the ground is not always hidden by a cover of grass. We know, yes, that in the desert, you can just find sand and sand. It is not covered with grass or with plants or with trees as it is in other climatic conditions. But whenever it rains, though it rains sometimes, but whenever it rains, which is rare, yes, rainfall is a rare occasion there, desert flowers bloom. So there are a few plants and bushes on which desert flowers also bloom. They also sprout and they bloom there. And the sight can be as rewarding as that of any tropical garden. And there also the sight is beautiful to see. You will just enjoy the sand as well as these small flowers growing there, blooming there. And as you can enjoy any other landscape, you will enjoy this landscape also. Many people go to celebrate even the desert festivals. So desert is also very enchanting and very nice to see, especially during the nights. Deserts are very cool and they can be very nice to spend time there. A desert is not always a flat, unchanging wasteland of dry sand. If you think that desert is just the same forever and ever, then this is not so. If you think that this is an unchanging wasteland, it is dry, it is barren, nothing is there, and it is always unchanging, then you are wrong. It may have mountains and hills, and you could have seen, as we just say that these are sand dunes, but there can be hills and mountains. It may have an oasis also, big or small. It can have some green part or green area where you can find some pond also, some trees also, some shade. So it could be small or big, but there could be an oasis. And oasis is like a green island in the middle of a desert. As we have a water island in the in sorry, as we have a land island in the middle of water, that is actually known as an island. Here also we can find greenery. So an area where it is a lot of green and there could be availability of water. This could be a green island in the middle of a desert where a spring or a well. Spring we know, no? Have you heard about jharna? That is a spring. Or a well, obviously human dug well, gives plants and trees a better. Can you see this picture? This is an oasis, and no, it is not an oasis. This is a desert where you can find cactus plants, you can find date plants or trees. Then you can see the human habitation huts. Then you can see the dressing of the people, the culture, especially in India. This is so. Then we can see the camel, which is the ship of the desert. This is an animal which has survived very well in the desert, and we can find that very few or scanty vegetation is found here. So yes, this is also a beautiful sight to see. So we can have chances to grow. So a few plant or trees can grow even here because there can be a spring or there can be a well. A desert may be hot, yes, like the Thar Desert of Rajasthan, or it can be cold, like the cold desert of Ladakh. Ladakh, no, as you go higher, higher and higher, then you can find Ladakh in India, but in the northern India. But generally speaking, if a place has little or no water and vegetation, people usually call it a desert. Yes, it is right. Where there is no water, no vegetation, it is a general theory that it can be called a desert. Some deserts are almost totally without water. There is no water at all. In such places, strong winds blow, raising heaps of sand and depositing them as mounds. So we know that we have heard about sand dunes. These are small mounds or small hills, and these hills are carried from one place to another. This sand is carried from one place to another by strong winds. So the sand dunes keep on shifting places because of the strong winds that are blowing. These are actually known as sand dunes. That means small hills of sand that shift and move endlessly across the desert. So, sand dunes always change their position because of the strong winds blowing, and they are endlessly moving. Few plants can survive on such dry, shifting sands. And yes, it is very hard to survive and adapt in this condition. So, very few plants have been able to survive in such dry and shifting sands. Shifting because these are always changing their positions. So, here we complete the first part. Desert plants and animals learn to require much less water than most plants and animals. Yes. How do the animals and plants adapt there? They have learned to use and require very less water, the minimum amount of water that is possible. And let us see how they have adapted in the desert. The camel is a typical desert animal. Yes, it can remain without water for a lot of days. Even our soldiers on the borders have been using the camel as a means of transport. Smaller desert animals have unusual means of satisfying their need for water. Some examples are given in this chapter how they are trying to save water or survive without water also. All living things need water in order to survive. Yes, this is a general scientific theory. We all know that if we are a living being, we require water to survive. The few plants and animals that survive in desert have developed the ability to require less water than most plants and animals. And yes, these plants and animals have survived and adapted to live without much requirement of water than as compared to obviously the other plants and animals where you need to water daily and you require a lot of water. The camel, popularly known as the ship of the desert, can drink a lot of water at one time. We have already known about this fact that camel drinks a lot of water and it keeps it in its pouch so that it can sustain without water for a lot of days. Camels, a couple of days at least. Camels can do without water for how many days? Can you see the camels drinking water? Then we come to these stars, the night in the desert, where we can see the cactus plants are there. We can see the scorpion. We can see the reptiles here who are surviving even in the desert. Now, camels can survive without water for days together. The reason is they sweat very little. You know, we sweat, there is sweating. हमें पसीना आता है, that is known as sweating, perspiration. But they sweat very little. So there are very few pores for sweating, and they don't lose water in this way by sweating. We sweat because we must keep our body temperature constant. Now, the reason why we sweat is we have to keep a constant body temperature, say about 36.7 Celsius, etc. We sweat when it gets hot. Okay, yes, we in the summer season we sweat a lot so that we lose water. We sweat, and that sweating cools down our body. It releases the heat from our body, and this cools the body. Camels can stand high body temperature, but opposite to our body, camel's body is different because it can sustain high body temperature also. They don't need to sweat and can therefore retain the water they drink for long periods. Their water is not wasted in sweating, so they can retain it for a long time, and their body temperature can also be high body temperatures can also be sustained by their body. The smaller desert animals do not drink water. Now, see this line, you will find very strange. The smaller desert animals do not drink water, any water, even a drop of water. They burrow underground where they are living because outside it is very hot. So they are burrowing underground during the hot day. They live under the sand in the burrows and come out at night. जो bill होते हैं, that is known as a burrow. So they come out at night to eat because night is a soothing time. So they are nocturnal. They come out at night to eat. Some of them eat other animals and get the water they need. Now, you know, every animal has some water in the flesh also. So these animals eat other animals and get the water from the moisture in the meat. This is the way that they are compensating their need for water. Others eat plants and seeds. Now, if they are not carnivorous, they eat plants, and in plants also there is water, in seeds also there is water, and get the water they need from plant juices. So, whether it is the animal flesh, water, or it is the plant juices, they are making the loss of water from this. They are not drinking water otherwise. They are making the use of these of the water available in plants as well as animals. Desert plants also adapt themselves to the life they lead. Yes, whether it is plants or whether it is animals, they all adapt according to the arid conditions. Cactus plants, especially cactus, as we are very well aware, store water in their thick stems. Have you seen the fleshy, thick stems of cactus? And there are no pores to where there can be transpiration possible, and there is no loss of water here. Their roots lie close to the surface of the ground. They are also not deeply rooted plants. They have very small fibrous root which is lying very close to the ground. So as soon as there is some water available, they just take it inside through the roots and quickly absorb the moisture from the light rain that occasionally fall. Even if there is lightest rain, then their roots are able to absorb that water into them. The major feature of all deserts is, of course, dryness. And so at least we know that yes, dryness is one of the major feature that is there in the desert. Dryness and variations of temperature. Now, how there is variation of temperature, you know that in the desert, the days are very hot and the nights are very, very cold. So there is a lot of difference in our otherwise in other places the temperature variations in during the day and night is not that much, but in desert it is. In hot desert it is. In humid climates, the moisture in the air acts like a blanket. So now we see that in humid climates, suppose it is our place or any other place, normal place, there is a lot of humidity, suppose. Then wherever there is a lot of rainfall, there is a lot of humidity. Suppose we talk about Bombay or Mumbai, the moisture is in the air acts like a blanket. So this moisture protects the earth's surface from the hot rays of the sun. So this moisture which is floating in the air is protecting the earth's surface from the sun rays. The absence of this blanket in desert causes the desert to heat up rapidly during the day and to cool off rapidly at night. But in the air, there is no such blanket or moisture floating in the air in the desert. That means there is nothing in the air in the desert. So what happens? The result of this is that the desert gets heated up very fast and it cools off also very fast. It is able to take up heat fast and then it is even able to give off heat fast. So this I think is a scientific explanation and you could be able to understand. Deserts are an important part of nature's great plan. Now, you should not think that deserts are completely useless and we should never go to a desert. They are also a kind of landscape and they are also a kind of nature's great plans. They are also beautiful landscapes. They are also a kind of landscape. They are there like the dense forest and the deep oceans. As we talk about that there are dense forests, there are deep oceans, there are high mountains, so there are deserts also. Just because they are hot and they are dry, one should not look upon them as useless parts of earth. Just because they are dry and they are very hot and it really becomes very difficult for us to live in the desert or adapt in the desert, we should not think that deserts are completely useless and we should never go to the desert and there should not be deserts anywhere on the earth. They are also a nature's variety of landscape. So here we should at the end the author just want to create a little positivity about the desert. Even if we are living in Rajasthan, we should not be feeling shy and ashamed that we are living in an arid region and that there is nothing here. So the author also wants to tell the same thing. I hope that you would have understood the chapter. Try to read it and understand it nicely.